Welcome back to Next Gen Console Watch, our show following the latest gaming hardware. I'm Damon Hatfield. This week I'm joined by Max Scoville, host of Podcast Beyond, and Ryan McCaffrey, host of Podcast Unlocked. And you probably heard last week, Sony has announced price increases for PS5, PS5 Pro, and PlayStation Portal, blaming continued pressures in the global economic landscape. The increase went into effect yesterday, April 2nd, here in the US. So PS5 is now $650. The digital edition is $600, and the PS5 Pro is $900. Sony last hiked the price of PS5 in the US in August last year when it confirmed $50 price increases for all PS5 models. I think this is a horrible state of affairs for the entire industry. With the PS5 Pro now $900, it's looking very much like the PS6 will be a $1,000 console, which it's just not going to be sustainable. Circana analyst Matt Piscatella says a bigger portion of the market is going to people who are more affluent, have higher incomes, and the lower income parts of the market are really struggling. That premium gaming space is leaning more and more on the affluent consumer. But consoles aren't the only things getting more expensive. Everything is, including groceries and gas. So fewer and fewer people are going to be able to afford a PS5 or a PS6. Since the PS5 Pro is now $900, I don't see how the PS6 could be any less than that. Instead of selling upwards of 100 million units, as Sony did with the PS2, PS4, and is about to with the PS5, Sony will sell a fraction of that because the PS6 will cost twice as much as the PS5 did at launch. So, Max, what I'm curious to get your thoughts on is these price increases feel bad. Nobody who buys a PS5 now is going to feel good about spending so much more than early adopters did at launch. I think PS5 sales are going to nosedive. How does Sony keep people excited about the PlayStation brand? And when the next State of Play rolls around, how do they keep the narrative from being something other than, oh, these look like a lot of cool games. Too bad I can't afford a PlayStation.
Yeah, so your intuition is right. This does feel bad. It is not a good feeling that we're feeling about this. Yeah, do you remember the whole debacle around the announcement of the PS3 price point, saying that it was $599? That was at launch. We are now 6 years almost into this console's life cycle, and the base PS5 is now $649. It is absurd. As for what this means for PlayStation, yeah, I'm worried. I'm a little bit worried because, again, we've seen this huge shift to PC gaming. We've seen lots of people moving towards PC. Sony for a second was moving towards PC and putting some of their first party stuff on there. With the multiplayer live service kind of games like, Helldivers 2 popping up on there, yielding pretty good results. I can see them continuing doing that, but the fact that they have this walled garden where they have their, first party Sony games that live or die depending on how many copies they sell, and how many copies they sell is entirely dependent on how many people own a PlayStation 5, if that is the only place you can play this thing. The big thing that will motivate people to buy a whole lot of PS5s is Grand Theft Auto 6, which is around the corner. Mm-hmm. And, you can also buy a Xbox Series for that, but given the sort of, install base of the PS5 at this point, I see a lot of people jumping towards that. But again, the price point also not great. It's concerning because at this point, so many third-party games, they come to PS5, they come to Xbox Series, and they come to PC. Xbox is doing everything they can to make it so that you can play Xbox games wherever the hell you want to play them, whether that's, streamed through, on an actual Xbox or streamed through Game Pass, remote play type thing, or, on PC. Whereas Sony is like, no, you can do this on PlayStation. You can do this one place. And by the way, that one place is increasingly more expensive to an unprecedented degree. Like, we've never seen consoles get this much more expensive ever, which it sort of feels like they're flailing around a bit. It's as for what this means for the PS6, I think it means we're not going to see the PS6 for a little while. I think they, at the very least, need to let things settle down a little bit, economically speaking. But the big concern here is that these price increases, in addition to trying to sort of keep themselves afloat and pay the increasingly pricey bills, this is a way of making this impending sticker shock of whatever the PS6 costs a little bit less. So if you raise the price of everything that's out now, and then the PS6 comes out and it's $1,200, it doesn't seem quite that bad. It's still very bad. It should not be that much. I mean, it might be $1,000. Whatever it's going to be, it's going to be pricey. I'm hoping that the PS6 is far enough away that, at the very least, we can see these inflated PS5 prices come down a little bit. Whatever it means for the PS5 price point wise, I think we're going to see a much bigger case of cross-platform games. Like, one of our big gripes about this console generation is how long it took PS5 games to come along. So many were just PS4 games that were, cross-platform release at launch, and there still is that massive PS4 audience. I don't really see Sony selling a whole lot of PS6s if they can barely move PS5s. But one way to get people to go out and buy a PS5 is to say, hey, we're raising the price again. You got a week. So I think they definitely saw some spikes in sales in the short term, but what this means in the long run is doesn't seem super promising.
Yeah, I think a lot of us are going to be sticking with our PS5s and Xbox Series X's for a long time to come. Ryan, the Xbox Series X, they've had their own price increases, but the Series X with a disk drive and 1 terabyte of storage is also $650 now, although Microsoft sells a 2 terabyte version for $800. So now that the consoles are back to price parity, do you think that sweetens the prospect of buying an Xbox today?
I don't know if it's beneficial to anyone. I don't even in a sort of head-to-head competitive sense. Max is certainly dead on in that Grand Theft Auto 6 being a current generation only game will move hardware. Plenty of that's going to be PS5. I'm sure Microsoft will sell plenty of Xboxes as well. They do have the Series S as and I'm going to use some heavy air quotes here, more affordable option. And I have to throw those air quotes on because even the Series S is $400 at this point, and we're 5 years into the generation, 5+ years into the generation. So, yeah, I guess it's less bad for Microsoft now that Sony has raised their prices to match Microsoft. So there's not sort of an inherent, like, maybe you'd think about it now and go, okay, well, you know what, Xbox has some, and they genuinely do have some great games coming along. They've got Game Pass. And so maybe there's at least a more of a thought process now for people that are considering that next-gen upgrade if they're still on a PS4 or on an Xbox One versus before when, the last number of months when Microsoft had raised their prices before Sony did, or at least done their second price increase before Sony did their second price increase. That was certainly advantage PlayStation for the time being there. But yeah, now it's nobody wins, everybody loses. And to Max's point, I don't see how the overlap of the generation from this one to the next one could possibly last a shorter amount of time than the overlap we've had from PS4 and Xbox One to PS5 and Series X. It's almost to me as if given this macroeconomic situation and the fact that these consoles do not seem like they're going to go down in price anytime soon, as has historically been the case as a console generation goes on, that I wonder if the PS5 and the Series X will kind of default into becoming the quote unquote base level, more affordable versions for next gen, because it's all just they're gonna have to overlap it, to Max's point, because Sony in their walled garden probably isn't going to sell a ton of PS6s at a 4-digit price point. And Microsoft obviously kind of pivoting in a little bit of a different direction, trying to combine a PC and a console into one with Project Helix, and that's almost certainly going to be over $1,000 as well. But at least Microsoft can try to sell that as, hey, you're getting a gaming PC here that also plays thousands and thousands and thousands of PC games. But regardless, yeah, I think it just means this generation that we're in right now sticks around a lot longer, even after the next gen consoles have been released.
Well, everyone is disappointed by it, but I think, man, you talk about Rockstar and GTA 6. I have to imagine even Rockstar would be disappointed in this news, because there will be people who will pay $650 for a PS5 just to play GTA 6. But imagine if the console prices had taken the more traditional trajectory 6 years in and the prices had come down. They would have been able to sell millions of more PS6s just to play GTA 6.
You're so right. And in fact, I hadn't really thought about it, but by your sound logic alone there, I think it's going to be pretty much impossible for Rockstar to sell as many copies of GTA 6 as they did of GTA 5. Like just on that, the barrier of entry being the cost to get in being so much higher.
Yeah.
There's just no way. I mean, now GTA 5 went across 3 different console generations, and maybe GTA 6 will in the end, but still, it's if things are just getting continually more expensive, then yeah, GTA 6 is going to do great, but it's not going to sell what 5 did, and maybe that has Take-Two looking at charging more for the game up front. I mean, that's a subject that's come up here before, and I know that's kind of not what our main topic is here today, but I do wonder if these increasing hardware costs during the course of GTA 6's development have Take-Two now thinking, okay, maybe we got to try and get our money up front and just charge $90 or $100 for this game just for the base version. I'm not advocating for that. Do not, please. That's not what I'm looking for, but I'm just trying to think like what they might be thinking in that boardroom.
Exactly. Now I understand it probably has become more expensive to manufacture PS5s. You've got a RAM shortage because of AI, and you've got tariffs on top of that. But even so, Max, do you think Sony should eat the cost in order to keep consoles selling at a brisk pace, keep overall sentiment about the PlayStation brand positive?
I do. You can't say that Sony's not sort of bootstrapping other departments. The other tragic news is that they canceled the Sony Honda Mobility Afeela car, the $100,000 way you could do remote play onto your PS5 if you brought a controller of your own while on the road. So now the only place you can drive one of those is in Gran Turismo 7. But again, that was clearly a very high profile luxury item, not really aimed at the general consumer. And I guess they kind of looked at what they were doing and they're like, maybe this isn't worth the trouble. So, at the very least, instead of trying to push that further, they're pulling the plug somewhat literally. But yeah, I mean, the idea was theoretically that they would sell these things at a loss and then make up the cost by selling games. Presumably games that they were involved with the production of, games that they published themselves even. And, increasingly, you see the most played games on the PSN are the same 5 games years in a row that are on PS4. So you have to wonder what is the real selling point for a PS6? Like if most people are still playing stuff you could play on last gen, maybe they jumped on this gen already. Maybe they're, holding out for Wolverine or Saros or whatever. But like Sony isn't exactly giving us like a steady drip feed of first party stuff to get people excited. So if their focus here is just selling hardware, then you'd think they would find ways to make that more enticing, more available. We've watched with Nintendo. Nintendo has done everything but raise the price of the Switch too. They've raised the price of Joy-Con. They've raised the price of Amiibo. They've done everything they can to not touch the new thing that they're trying to get into people's hands. Because once the thing gets into people's hands, they're off to the races. Mario Kart and otherwise. Like it's you want to get people in the door to the walled garden, before you start charging landscaping fees or what have you. But it's I worry that how do you justify a PS5 at this point? I mean, GTA is the short answer for that, but like a PS6 comes along. The fact that we're even having this conversation right now, I would hope we're waiting a while for a PS6 because it feels like a slower version of phones. Like there was that point when, Apple came out and showed off the new iPhone and then we all kind of collectively, I forget what generation it was, but I think everyone has their own sort of, personal standpoint for this. There's a point where it just doesn't grab you. The new phone doesn't have enough things that it does that makes you go, I need that. You're kind of like, okay, I'll just stick with the one I have. And early on, they had like a new feature every generation that was something you needed to have. Like it was, this has got the, this shoots HD video, or this has Face ID, whatever the feature was. And in this case, consoles we've talked about this, it's kind of diminishing returns in terms of what the hardware can actually do. And the hardware is less of a concern than what the software can do and what the software is doing. And if Sony's other big selling point for a PlayStation, whatever generation it is this games that you can only play on PlayStation, then it should probably show off a bunch of those before, make some of those before telling us how much it costs to buy the thing that plays them. I don't know.
At least Nintendo has a path to a slightly more affordable Switch 2, assuming they do a Switch 2 Lite, right? And Microsoft already, their path is available now. Like they have the Series S, which is, again, slightly less expensive at 400. And I mean, you can debate if the power difference and whether it's worth paying $400 for that machine. But Sony they don't have a path that we've seen to a more affordable PlayStation 5, short of just, like you said, Max, just eating the cost and taking the hit on the hardware side and in exchange for hopefully selling more games.
No, we talked about this at length on Beyond this week, and there's really no fun angle here. There's no way to look at it that's like, hey, this is exciting. This is just crappy news across the board for pretty much everyone involved. The thing that jumped out at me that I think is odd, not to keep comparing video game consoles to Apple stuff, but Apple historically has been kind of designer consumer electronics. They come out with like the more expensive phone that is vaguely glamorous, and maybe it has less features, but it's part of this ecosystem. And you can make some comparisons between that and PlayStation. Apple put out a MacBook that's $600, like their new MacBook, and it's crazy to me that a brand new Apple laptop is presently cheaper than a PlayStation. That just feels like, it feels like a weird timeline, because it is.
It's the worst timeline. Yeah, I don't see $1,000 consoles being sustainable for 40 years. Consoles have cost a few $100s basically. The Atari 2600 was $200 in 1977. The PS4 was $400 at launch. Switch was $300 at launch. PS5, Xbox Series X for $500 at launch. Yeah, now going all the way up to $900. We talked a lot. The console market is not growing. It's stagnant. It has no console has sold as many units as the PlayStation 2 did, which launched back in 2000. And pricing consumers out of the console market isn't going to grow the market at all.
And it's not just the higher prices at launch. It's just that they're not going down. If they never go down, the market is really, really in trouble.
Us, the hardest of the hardcore gamers, this is the way it used to work. We buy at launch. We sort of act as proponents, champions of the platform. And then over the years, as the library grows, cost of components go down, they can lower the price. That's when the real mainstream, more casual audience comes along. But they're not going to show up if consoles cost $1,000. So the PS5 with the disc drive is 30% more than it was at launch. The PS5 digital edition is 50% more expensive today than it was in 2020. I don't see how this is real life. So
yeah, this was a graphic pulled off of the R Gaming subreddit, and it's it's really frustrating to look at it. Like, our big takeaway on Beyond this week was we kind of just want to go buy a PS4 again.
Yeah, right.
Because PS4 is great, man. That felt like Sony kind of like with its tail between its legs being like, okay, PS3, maybe we got a little cocky. Maybe we're just kind of doing our own thing. Maybe we thought we were untouchable. Let's try it. Let's just tone it down. Let's sell something for $400 that plays other games for, it's developer friendly. It's not doing some next gen cell processing technology. And then I don't know. I feel like we're getting PS3 era of Sony again, but without the PS3
Humble
era games.
Sony is gone.
These are dark times for gamers. So viewers, we want to know, how much are you willing to pay for a console at launch? $300 to $500, maybe up to $700, maybe up to $1,000 or more. Make sure to vote at IGN.com the day this episode goes live. You can also vote on Spotify now, as the video version is available on Spotify, and we'll share the results with you next episode. Just like we can last episode's poll results. We're talking about Nintendo while I was away at PAX East. You asked, what's the best Switch 2 exclusive so far? Over 50% said Donkey Kong Bonanza, which is a little bit surprising to me just because Pokemon is so huge and everyone loves Pokopia, and that would have a little bit more recency bias potentially. But that was at number 2. Mario Kart World at number 3. Mario Tennis Fever way down at number 6. I don't know why that was on. That was not going to be anyone's favorite Nintendo Switch 2 exclusive. All right, it's time for a brand new month of gaming. Jump into the Humble March Choice Bundle and score an amazing lineup of titles. Right now you can grab Tempest Rising, Chants of Sonar, Sworn, Etrian Odyssey 3 HD, Bread and Fred, 0 Hour, Small Lands Survive the Wild, and Hard West 2. This all supports the Malala Fund, an organization working for a world where every girl can learn and lead by breaking down the barriers that hold back the more than 130 million girls out of school today. Head to humblebundle.com through April 7th to start playing now. And that's our show. Thank you to both Max and Ryan. Thank you to everyone working behind the scenes to make this show possible. My name is Daemon. We'll be back next week with more of the latest gaming hardware. We'll see you then. This episode of Next Gen Console Watch was produced by Damon Hadfield, Jobert Atienza, and Sam Claiborne. Damon is also the host, and Max Scoville and Ryan McCaffrey serve as regular panelists. Technical direction is by Jobert Atienza, with technical production by Marian Franzen and Amir Rakib. Audio engineering is handled by Amir Rakib. Post-production editing is by Jobert Atienza, and graphic design is by Justin Vachon. Next Gen Console Watch is an IGN production and part of the Geek Media Network.